And we are back. This time it's the attacking assets. Hopefully, if you've caught up with our defensive assets podcast, which dropped on Wednesday. Great insights there from my esteemed co-host, husband of the show. It's Mr. Jason McKenna. It hasn't been very long since I last seen you, but I'm assuming things are still going very well and you're still extremely nervous heading into the final weekend with just a slender 7-point lead when I'm sitting on a bench boost going into the final day.
It's way too worrying. I don't like it at all, Ben. Usually I'm much higher up in the rankings than this, but you know what? It makes this end of season fun. It's like a real good battle to keep it spiced up, because I lost interest basically around Christmas time, if I'm honest, because the season was just absolutely dreadful. And I'm sure you were the same as well. But then when we started getting close to each other, it was suddenly back on. It was suddenly go time competition. And I think we said this on a podcast a few weeks ago about how, when there's nothing much to play for in FPL, you've either got to go out and have fun or you got to find something else to inspire. You got to beat your friend or beat your family member or just give yourself a target to kind of work towards. Because for a lot of people, this season has been a write-off. And this game week 38 will hopefully be a fun one. But before we get into those assets, I do have to remind you, remember to like the video, share it with friends, comment below as well. We love getting involved with the conversation. You'll always find that if you make a comment, unless you're one of those porn bots that just says, please click on this link and look at somebody with some nice, assets, then
attacking assets.
Yeah, nice attacking assets. We don't respond to them, but if there's genuine questions, we will always say, well, I don't. I'm speaking for myself. But yeah, there's a lot of good conversation here, and that's why we also jump on the Reddit discussions, which will be a video that will come out a bit later today to follow this one. And also subscribe to the channel because we've got so much great content coming out for the Euros, for next season. We've got some great guests lined up, some fantastic content just for you. And as always, like I said there, get involved with the comments, but if you have a certain show, if you have a certain player that you want us to analyze, we will do that as well. That's the fantastic thing about Premier injuries. But yeah, we do have to talk about attacking assets today, the stuff that we can talk about on YouTube. And in terms of it, I think this game week is going to be an exciting one. Game week 38. I always look forward to the final game week of the season. I usually like to make a prediction or two of what is actually going to be the highest scoring game of the weekend. And actually, before we get off in terms of individual players or teams to look at, Ben, is there any game specifically that you think that's going to be a real kind of fantastic, dramatic end to the season with a lot of goals, a lot of fun, and just maybe the one to possibly watch at that 4 p.m. Sunday afternoon?
Of course, at the time of recording, we still have a number of fixtures still to come. And I think that can heavily influence potentially, what we could see on Sunday. For example, Liverpool will still harbour hopes of pushing for that Champions League. They going down to Selhurst Park. Roy's last game, again, a former Liverpool manager as well. Handbrakes are off, pressure's off. It could be very open and entertaining, and if Liverpool have got to go out there and get the 3 points, and, they may need the goal difference, they have that attacking power to be able to go out and blow anybody away. I'm trying to think, I cast my mind back when Liverpool beat Palace 7-0. Do I recall that accurately? It's the last season or two, everything's just blurring into one, but I did actually watch that game, and Liverpool were great. And would you put it past them, doing something like that again? Of course not. They're going to be riding on a high after that Alisson late goal, which kept them in the running. Of course, they've got a game at Turf Moor on Wednesday at first, but if they come back off another 3 points, they've got that momentum, they've got that confidence, and they will be gunning for those teams above them for those Champions League qualifying spots. So that would be one that certainly ticks a few boxes for me. And why not? Why not look at me? At my hometown club as well. Attacking, going forward. We've been great in recent weeks. If you can score, 3 past Manchester City, then why can't you go out and score 3, 4, 5 against a Fulham side? So Newcastle. Maybe piques a little bit of interest as well. I think maybe St. Maxim's due a goal or two. Willock will want to maybe bow out potentially, with a goal before he returns back to Arsenal. Almiron, he'll want to prove a few doubters wrong as well. So yeah, look, there's still lots of interest and a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of appeals this weekend.
Yeah, I think the one that I've got my eye on is actually Southampton and West Ham's game, because West Ham have arguably been the worst defence over the last few game weeks, and Southampton haven't been great themselves throughout the whole of the season. They could have been absolutely demolished by Leeds if they'd had their shooting boots a little bit more securely fastened. Bamford, Rodrigo, Rafinha, they all look so good in that game. And that's the thing about West Ham. They do have a fiendish attack, which should punish Southampton. But Southampton have the same. Shea Adams is looking in fine form. I don't know if Danny Ings will be, playing the full 90. He might be kind of rested. You've even got Walcott, Tejas, Ward-Prowse. There's a whole glut of really fun attacking options there. But yeah, that's the one that I'm going to pick there. And I'll be watching closely on that Liverpool Palace game as well. I wonder if there'll be a repeat. Maybe it'll be a 7-goal thriller. Hopefully Palace don't lose 7-0, because I would like to see good old Roy given a royal send-off, because he really does deserve that. He's a legend of the game. But let's look at the attacking teams. The 5 best attacking teams in game week 38 are Liverpool, West Ham, Leeds, Sheffield United, Fulham. Bit like yesterday's video, I discount Sheffield United and Fulham just because of their poor kind of scoring records this season. They might have something a little bit more to play for, just for pride and things like that. But I wouldn't count them as a really good attack. Whereas the other 2 after that are Burnley and your boys, Newcastle. So let's go through these teams. Let's see which assets to go for, and then possibly some other players, some other individuals that might be worth looking at as well. So starting off with Liverpool, with that, plum for Palace fixture that you're really looking forward towards, Ben. It's a double up of Liverpool forwards that could be on the cards, but which ones to go for? Jota, possibly injured. Mane has not been in form. It's a real question. You said yesterday if you had to choose any kind of 3 Liverpool players in your side, it would be Phillips, TAA and Salah. But does somebody like Mane or Firmino not come into the thinking with just this one game, one punt, shootout where anything can and does happen historically? Just looking at the data before I get your opinions, Mane has been frustrated. He's described this as his worst season of his professional career. He'll want to end that season on a high. Data has not been with him, though. Diego Jota has been much better, higher XG, more shots in the box, better XGI than Mane. And then if you look at the attention of Bobby Firmino, who, he has actually been involved with a few kind of goals and things. He's had 2 over the last 4 game weeks, but his shots have been limited as well. He's only actually mounted 1.19 XGI, where you look at Salah or Diego Jota, even Trent Alexander-Arnold have all kind of outperformed that as well. Are they a punt too far, though? Maybe the Mane or Firmino option?
Ooh, it is a tough call. It really is. When I look at Trent, who was one of the players that I bring, I consider him almost as an attacking asset. So it would be Salah and Trent. I'm not really looking at Trent as a defensive attack. It's what he brings to the attack. And I'm more confident that he can bring attack and returns than a Firmino or a Mane. It just hasn't clicked for them. You expected maybe Firmino to back up that performance at Old Trafford against Man United with his 2 goals. You expected them to back that up against West Brom. Again, just didn't really happen. We're expecting, so at the time of recording, Liverpool travel to Turf Moor. Has Mane got something to prove, not only to himself, to supporters, to Jurgen Klopp, following his, that little sort of snub he gave him when he wasn't happy at Old Trafford? We just don't know. They're risky for me. Whereas with Trent and Salah, I'm pretty confident, and I would go into that game on the understanding that, well, actually, what is I like those picks, and you know what, even if they did blank, I still feel as if I've made that right decision. Whereas with Mane and Firmino, it's like, well, I'm throwing them in there just because maybe if I'm going for something, a differential in my mini league, and I need to try and gain, those few extra points to maybe close a gap or close out the league, and those around me have got the Trents and the Salah, then maybe I'd go down that route. Otherwise, it's not for me. I don't really see it, if I'm honest. And Diogo Jota is a player that I had owned, but the injury concern, not as bad as initially thought, but the injury is enough to put me off. And certainly I don't see him either starting or completing 90 minutes.
Would you say that your answer is then alternative Liverpool attackers? For me, no. That was
nice,
wasn't it?
B plus.
I like that we're giving ratings. You rated my fantastic accents as well.
Very, very sharp, very sharp.
Just in terms of Diogo Jota, though, if Klopp came out, so he said there's a tiny, tiny little chance for him to play at the weekend. If he was declared fit, do you think that he would start, and would that change your opinion as a 6.9 midfielder?
It's an impact injury. It's bone, so it's not as if we're talking about a muscular problem. So the issues would be really if Klopp does say that it is around pain management. So that would indicate that there would be a better chance of them completing those extra minutes. If the game was tight and Liverpool needed to win, then he would get those minutes. I certainly don't see him going with 4 in attack. I think that would be a last roll of the dice, particularly now that we've seen Reece Williams and Nat Phillips in that backline. We know that Kovacs isn't going to be returning, or highly unlikely. So that keeps Firmino in midfield, and I think Liverpool look a lot more solid as a unit with Fabinho in midfield. So it looks as if it would be 3 from 4 as opposed to maybe it's like with a Fab 4 in there. So it would be, who does he actually drop, and that would be the worry. And if things are going well, he's going to be pulling one of those players out. For me, Salah's the only player that I would hang my hat on starting and playing the most minutes.
So let's move attention then to Leeds. Now, obviously, with the attacking best attacks, we said there that West Ham were up next, but I'm going to focus on Leeds because I actually want to talk about West Ham with Southampton there. As we said there, that's one of the most exciting games. And I think a lot of the data kind of intermingles between the two of them. With Leeds, Bamford, I think, looked really bright against Southampton. He was back to almost his whole old self. Maybe he was a little bit more rested, less fatigued than maybe others in the league, and really looked fantastic. I was just disappointed he didn't put more away. I felt he could have. Rafinha was a little bit quieter against Southampton. I think coming back from that injury, maybe just building up that match sharpness. But Rodrigo, I mean, goodness me, he has been on fantastic form. I would stick with Bamford over him. The question is, do you double up? Because Rodrigo is actually classed as a forward. But would you have other players up there that maybe Chris Wood and Antonio, Shea Adams, even Harry Kane? You know, there's a lot of players up there for those limited forward spots. But the big thing for me is that Rodrigo, in the last few games since he's been playing, I think he does have actually the best XGI per minute of all players, 78.8. That is definitely the most in the Leeds team. I mean, that is sensational stuff. He's looking really, really good on top of that. What would be your selection of Leeds forwards then? Because, like I said there, Rafinha still not 100%. Rodrigo, do you have him instead of Bamford? I mean, there is a lot of debate actually there.
Yeah, well, I've tripled up on Leeds, so we know that I've got Dallas, and I kept faith in Rafinha. And yeah, look, no surprise to see him maybe a below par performance by his own very high standards against Southampton. You know, just again coming back off that injury and playing games in quick succession. But I'm happy to stick with him again. You know, we're talking about the final weekend, and it's in front of a crowd, and you know they'll want to go out with a bang. And for me, I've actually plumbed for Rodrigo. I think he deserved a start. And actually, in game week 37, my predicted lineup, I actually had Rodrigo coming in for Bamford. I actually dropped Bamford, much to a lot of people's surprise, and was the cause of a lot of discussion around that. But I just, you know, like you said, I just thought he had went off the boil a little bit. He was maybe a little bit tired. He had been the subject to quite a few withdrawals by Bielsa, and Rodriguez was coming in and delivering. I was correct in the Rodrigo call. Like I say, he deserved it. But, you know, Bamford has responded to maybe one or two criticisms that he's had, or look, to lay to bed any worries or effects of fatigue going into these final couple of games. So why not? You know, they seem to be, you know, riding a bit of a crest of a wave. Why not double up on that Leeds attack? We know they have done all season. They're going to run. They're going to create chances. And if Rodrigo can help share the load, and Bamford's, you know, he may still harbour hopes of going to the Euros. You know, it's certainly not out the realms of possibility. So, you know, another big performance and another couple of goals from maybe Bamford could be enough to pique Gareth Southgate's interest. You still don't know, you know, there's a lot of expectation that Ollie Watkins, you know, will be part of that Three Lions squad. Aston Villa have 2 games left at the time of recording, and you know there will be 1 or 2 curveballs thrown in terms of injuries between now and when that you know the squad's selected. So you know Bamford will still feel that he's got a bit of a point to prove, and he will feel in his own mind that, you know, based on what he's done this season, he offers something a little bit different than what England have already got, that he maybe deserves a place in that Three Lions squad.
And I think as well, Leeds are one of the most informed teams in the league. You know, look at their form since game week 30 after that little bit of a break. That probably served them well. They beat Sheffield United. They beat Man City. They drew with Liverpool, drew with Man United. They did lose, unfortunately, to Brighton, but then beat Tottenham, thrashed Burnley, and then they should have thrashed Southampton. I mean, there's only one loss there in their last few game weeks. It's sensational. And then over the last 4 game weeks, the most goals with 9. I mean, it is a team really in form. You want to capitalize upon that. Looking at the XGI data over that last 4, where they've almost kicked on a little bit, if you will. Rodrigo is top, then Bamford, Dallas, then Harrison. So if you want to follow the data, if you want to follow the people that are in form in one of the most informed attacks, you probably would plumb for Rodrigo over Bamford. You probably would go for Harrison over Rafinha. And Dallas, you know, goes without saying, he is a fine own there. Let's move the attention, though, to Burnley. They are up there. I think the only realistic one is Chris Wood. Now, he arguably himself is the most informed forward in the Premier League at the moment. He's playing so well, 5 goals in his last 6, high XGI, high XG. I like him a lot for this final game as well. You know, we were kind of saying that there are limits to Burnley, but he kind of almost transcends that. He has been in fine form even when Burnley have struggled in certain games. And I think that this is a great game for him against maybe not a hugely porous Sheffield United defence. They're not, like a Norwich or a Huddersfield of years gone by where they've just gone down without even a fight. But I can see him getting involved at some sort of level here, don't you, Ben?
He's had an absolutely great season, and arguably he would be there or thereabouts in my team of the year for the Premier League, given what he's contributed to Burnley and his influence, and almost single-handedly have kept them in the top flight. Took over the mantle from Ashley Barnes, and he's been outstanding. However, does that almost project, his performances, project him to a little bit of a higher level, to almost where you would look at that Burnley team and think, right, well, where's your goals coming from? Is it a Vidra? Is it a Rodriguez? Do we looking at McNeil? Are we looking at Brownhill? Now it's Wood and very few other players. Our team's now saying, well, actually, look, let's just nullify Chris Wood. Sheffield United, for me, are fairly robust. You have John Egan, who's coming back. He's fresh. They'll stop that supply line. You could go man-to-man, heavy marking on Chris Wood. Easier said than done, I know. And then you're looking at that Burnley team and thinking, well, where else are the goals coming from? And for me, that would be the only concern. And as we touched upon on the defensive assets podcast, Sheffield United, for me, I quite like them for the clean sheet this weekend. I just think, it's been a long, hard season for Burnley in terms of the number of injuries that they've had to contend with in key positions. Again, they may be just looking a little bit jaded, a little bit fatigued. They're up, it's job done. Dyche will go to the board, the new owners, he will lay out his map and his plan for the summer. And I'm not saying that's going to take the foot off the gas, but maybe the Leeds performance was just a little bit of an insight into what's going on there down at Burnley now, and we'll see what happens against Liverpool, and that'll give us a better understanding. But if Liverpool were to go there to Turf Moor and get 3, 4, or maybe more, then for me Burnley would be in a void.
Okay. I mean, it's a difficult one with them because the actual team stats of Burnley aren't all that enticing. They're much lower down. There are other teams, surprising teams, actually, to see Crystal Palace 4th best in terms of expected goals over the last 4 game weeks. They're much below the likes of other teams. And so in terms of an individual, Chris Wood is in fine form. But will he be getting that service? And as you said there, against the Sheffield United team that know how to defend well, it's just kind of escaped them this season because of terrible injuries and also the loss of a fantastic goalkeeper in Dean Henderson. This could be a game where he's almost found out, as you've explained there. And I don't think that Burnley have that capacity to create. Whereas, let's have some fun here. Let's talk about the Geordies. Let's talk about Newcastle. Which assets to go there? I mean, you're looking pumped up just even me mentioning it. There's the question of who to go for. Alan Saint-Maxim, Geordie Joe, one of our absolute favourites here on the podcast, but maybe neither. Should we looking at another Geordie Joe, Joe Willock? Not quite Geordie 100%, but since game week 30, no side has scored more goals than Newcastle. Really shocking statistic there. And Joe Willock is the best XGI per minute of all Newcastle players over the last 4 game weeks with 2 goals to his name. He looks unlocked. He looks really up for it, proving himself to his parent club, Arsenal. I mean, which one of those would you go for?
I mean, we also see Joe Willock on penalties, surprisingly, against Manchester City. I know he missed. It wasn't great, but he nabbed the rebound. And he's looked sharp. He's looked quick. He feels he's probably looking at that Arsenal team and seeing them underperforming this season and thinking, I've got something to prove. I can play in that team. We're under no illusions. I don't think we'll be retaining his services in any way, shape or form next season. I think he'll have his eyes firmly on a place down in Mikel Arteta's starting 11 even. And looking at the squad, I think that's, and what he's produced, I think that's, that's well within his grasp. Alan St-Maximin, he's bubbling under the surface. He's a threat. Anybody with the types of pace that he's got, which is electrifying. He's a handful. He's a box of tricks. He's a raw Adama Traore, or maybe he's just an Adama Traore this season in terms of, doesn't always make the right decisions, but he's a pest, and I think Newcastle have benefited from that. Almiron, again, you've got to throw him into the equation. There's a few doubters here on Tyneside. He will feel he's got a point to prove. Who would I go for? I think Willock and St-Maximin would be the two players that I'd be drawn towards. As much as I couldn't plumb for Geordie Joelinton. I just couldn't do it, unfortunately. He's playing him in that central role. He just isn't a centre forward, a striker, regardless of what the stats say, and regardless of what his numbers on the board are. I just have no confidence in him, maybe getting a goal, never mind the 2 or 3, whereas I think, those other players, they provide you with that little bit of optimism and hope that they can produce something magical and special. I just really don't see that from Joelinton, unfortunately.
And I think the numbers would actually back up that opinion as well. You look at Joe Willock's individual data, good XG 1.62 over the last 4. As I said, 2 goals, and his XGI is 1.71. And then you look at Geordie Joe, it's almost half that of Joe Willock's. He's only had 1 goal involvement, but actually his XG data as well, 0.96 and 0.98 for XG and XGI respectively. So realistically, yeah, it's not as good for the other Geordie Joe on Tyneside, and Joe Willock is the Joe to plumb for. And in terms of Alan St-Maximin, I think, again, the data reflects exactly what you've said. He looks busy. He looks at times like a headless chicken. And I love watching him because he is a truly entertaining player. But with that, he doesn't do a lot. He hasn't created a lot of chances. He doesn't have a high XG or XGI. And so, the attention should be probably on the informed player, Joe Willock. He's a bit like Lingard at West Ham. You want to jump on these players when they're in form at the time. They might fade a little bit later when, certain things catch up with them, but he's riding on a crest of a wave at the moment, and it's a perfect time to get him in a really good game for it. Now, we do move the attention to West Ham, which I said there, I wanted to couple them up with talking about Southampton because of that game. There's a lot of possibility there. Antonio's the obvious pick, so I don't think we need to go with him too much. But I think consideration should and could be given to Benrahma over Jesse Lingard. Again, somebody that looks entertaining. I was actually excited when West Ham signed Benrahma as well. From his days at Brentford, really wonderful player. I think he's a classic kind of Brentford signing, Moneyball one, with high quality, low money, and they're just finding a seriously talented player. And so when he made that transition to West Ham, I was excited to see what he could do, but he hasn't done a lot. But over the last few game weeks, he's stepped up that level. And I think one of the things that really jumps out for me is a sizzling 25 minutes per chance created in the Premier League over the last 4 game weeks, 7 chances created. And obviously, as we said there, his minutes have been managed this season for one reason or another, whereas Lingard has almost faded a little bit over the last few weeks and maybe switching to the more informed player. Or do you think, Ben, that Lingard deserves that final game week against Southampton? This could be a game, where he's got a lot still, maybe Euro, maybe a transfer. There's a lot on his cards that he'll be wanting to fight for as well.
Yeah, I managed to jump on Lingard nice and early and then jumped off at the right time. Although there's still, like I say, there's still a lot to appeal from Lingard. The concerns with Ben Rama, yeah, he got a goal, but it was from the bench last time out. And the worry would be, does he start? I'm not 100% certain. We've seen Jared Bourne in and out in recent game weeks. Fornals has got the nod. So I'm not 100% certain whether Ben Rama, like I say, gets into that starting 11 initially, or whether David Moyes sees him somebody as a more of an impact player against those more maybe tired defenses. So that would be my only concern. And as we've talked about, Lingard, he's got that little bit of that Midas magic about him in terms of the attracting points when he's not necessarily playing very well. He'll be on penalties, hopefully. I'm not sure what the situation is with maybe Antonio back, and even but we assume, I think he took his last penalty at Newcastle. So for that, I think Lingard, just edges it for me. I'm happy I'm off, and I'm happy to take the chances and take my risk. But again, he falls into that bracket of a team and as a player who still has something to prove and still has something to play for on that final day.
So maybe Southampton are the more appealing team then. You're a big James Ward-Prowse fan. He's served you really well this season. Somebody that you stuck with through thick and thin. But Che Adams as well. Now, as I said there, Southampton are playing the second worst defence in the league over the last 6 in terms of XG conceded and things like that. And the Southampton attack has actually been in fine form. You look at their goal scoring data over the last few game weeks, and this kind of comes under the whole, with nothing to play for, teams kind of push on. They concede more, but they also sometimes score more. Looking at it over the last 4 game weeks, Southampton sit just behind Chelsea at the top for expected goals. 7 goals scored as well, which is fairly decent output. They're getting a fair amount of shots in the box. They're keeping busy with chances created, 3rd best in the league. This is a team playing almost with a handbrake off. They're maybe a little bit more free now that they don't have any worries of relegation. And then you look at Che Adams himself and his individual XG, XGI. He's up there at the top of the league in terms of the last 4 game weeks. 2.1 expected goals, 2.98 expected goal involvement. The worry for me, though, is that all this comes from just 5 shots in the box. So it's a bit limited, but he scored 2 goals. Would you maybe focus your attention? So we're talking about that West Ham Southampton game. Would your attention maybe be on James Ward-Prowse, to kind of assist the likes of Che Adams?
I was quite sweet on Southampton heading into game week 37. I fancied Danny Ings and Che Adams to, the 2-prong attack in a 4-4-2. James Ward-Prowse supplying the bullets. Again, all players that have got something to prove. And that didn't quite come to fruition. And Ings started on the bench against Leeds. And what we're hearing is that Che Adams has actually came off at half-time during that game because of a groin issue. So that's it's a little bit of a niggling complaint, and that could potentially rule him out this weekend. And who does Ralph Hasenhüttl put up there? I think he's tried Nathan Redmond in the past. I certainly expect Danny Ings to start. I think he's even had Nathan Tella up there in one way, shape or form in the past. You've got Michael Obafemi, who's back after surgery as well, who's just sort of getting some minutes under his belt. I'm cool, and that result against Leeds, which I thought, again, at St Mary's with their home supporters, was an ideal opportunity to back up the result at the weekend where they won 3-1, I think, against Fulham. It was an ideal opportunity to really kick on and finish the season strong, and they just failed to deliver once again. Just that level of inconsistency. I think there's a heavy reliance on Danny Ings. I think there's still, and again, I think it's a bit of a risky punt. And if I was a betting man, I think West Ham would be my call in that day, just to get it over the line and put them in with a chance of reaching, those European qualification places.
So you've lost your faith in James Ward-Prowse then coming towards the end of the season?
I just think Southampton have just tapered off a little bit. You question where's the real desire and the incentive coming from. They're up against a West Ham team who, will go out there all guns blazing. Professionalism, will tell you that, yeah, they'll go out there and they'll get battered. And James Ward-Prowse is Player of the Year for the club, and Danny Ings again will want to serve a gentle reminder to Gareth Southgate that he's fit, he's sharp, he's scoring goals, he deserves a place at blank Euro 2020. But I just think, West Ham might have too much for them on the day, and it could be a 1 or 2-0, which obviously would mean that a James Ward-Prowse would potentially blank.
So the blue half of London is looking fine in form, but I think the problem is here with Tuchel. Yes, Chelsea have been arguably top for XG over the last few game weeks, the last 4 for sure, but maybe the last 6 as well. But they haven't matched that scoring record. So I think that's one thing that puts me off immediately, but you also don't know who's going to play there. I mean, would you risk maybe getting in a Mason Mount, or is that just a bit silly with maybe some more appealing fixtures and more appealing individuals for game week 38?
Mason Mount is again, he's on my watch list. He would be one of the players that I would certainly have highlighted. And you would think that Tuchel is looking to nail down that Champions League final starting 11, of which Mason Mount, he will be in there. Alongside who else, we just don't quite know. There's injury concerns over Kante, which could, mess with things slightly. Where else? I mean, Havertz missed out on Tuesday evening as well. So that maybe simplifies the decision. As individuals, I do like Ziyech. I do like Pulisic. I think they're great players, but they're all too risky and they're very punty, just given those selections. So, Will Werner, Werner maybe looks as if he's going to start, but he's got no real great form, that level of consistency. Again, I think it would have to be Mason Mount. Would I give him some serious consideration? Look, yeah, I don't see why not. Again, they've got that little bit of a wave of momentum. They want to finish the season strongly, and they're full of confidence, having gone into that Champions League final as well.
A team that we have said should be on fine form, scoring a lot of goals, but the injury of Harry Maguire has kind of almost hindered that. Manchester United, I think a lot of people are questioning, should they get in Mason Greenwood or should they get in Cavani? Both of them have looked really good towards this end of season run. But in that final game, our data suggested that they'd be scoring lots of goals. But the team data actually from this season, they're on 4.92 expected goals. They have scored 7, so they've overperformed. But they're well down the table. They're in the bottom half of the table in terms of expected goals. They've had limited number of chances created. Their big chances created has been only 4 in the last 4 game weeks. They're not looking fantastic like they were a little bit earlier in the season. I mean, should the attention even be on the likes of Greenwood or Cavani for that last game against Wolves?
I do like Cavani. I really do. And again, we talked about rest and recovery between games. That shouldn't be an issue for the veteran striker who we know from the season. Ollie doesn't like to play him games in quick succession, but he's got an additional 48 hours to typically what you would see with United, maybe from a Europa League tie to a Premier League tie. So that shouldn't be a problem. And I would expect United to go out strong this weekend. Is it worth a punt? Yeah. Look, if it was going to be anybody, I'd prefer Cavani over Greenwood. I'm hopeful that Rashford will start, having been benched against Fulham. We assume that's a problem with his foot as opposed to maybe anything else. So that might be something that, again, that's being slightly managed. And it's even hard to look past Bruno. Again, I mean, we talk about Bruno and this, the magician, the master of the no-touch assist. I mean, it's a joke, really. It's as a fantasy manager who doesn't own him, it absolutely boils me piss. It's pathetic. And yet he's still attracting points and he doesn't have to do anything for it. So for that reason alone, he probably deserves to be in your team.
Yeah, I think Fernandes is a fine one to own for this game week. But it is the question of Cavani over Greenwood. If you have the data at hand, Greenwood actually has the better data. But then Cavani, whenever he is on the pitch, he is looking sharp. The final team that I want to put to you for this final game week is the Foxes of Leicester. Now, they actually weirdly have it all to play for. And once again, in the last 2 seasons, I think they've squandered an opportunity for a dead certified Champions League place with a late season collapse. Maybe people should question Brendan Rodgers a little bit more. Is this the Tottenham under Pochettino effect? A cup final run or winning a cup in Leicester's instance, which Tottenham seem to find very, very hard to do. Does that paper over the cracks of a end of season almost collapse from a team that were riding high, that they were looking safe in terms of Champions League? Now they do have to perform against Liverpool. The positive for me is that they have to score a lot of goals to beat Liverpool in terms of goal difference. That is if Liverpool win tonight. And then in that situation there, Iheanacho, Vardy, the whole team are going to be well aware that they have to score maybe 4 goals, I think it was, if Liverpool were to go on. They're just going to be well aware of the situation. They're going to play with the handbrake off. They're really going to go for it. But they're also in luck, as Tottenham's defence has been really, really poor of late. They're one of the kind of worst performing over the last kind of 6 game weeks. Does that kind of inspire you to have more than one Leicester City asset? Or does it have the opposite effect that they've kind of collapsed, they kind of let themselves down, so maybe you should avoid them?
The absence of Johnny Evans has been key during this period of, inconsistent level of performances and conceding goals. It looks as if he's run his race for the season, so we don't think he's going to recover in time. And we've seen Kelechi Iheanacho dropped. On Tuesday evening, he obviously came off the bench and he grabbed a goal at Stamford Bridge. So you'd assume that that's enough for Brendan Rodgers to throw him back in there. Question marks whether James Maddison will start. You've got the likes of Ricardo Pereira, who could come into that team. Albrighton, Perez, Tielemans has been in decent nick. Do I see them going out and blowing teams away? I think for that, you need Jamie Vardy somewhere near his best. Not necessarily banging in the goals, but we've seen him just as a supply line to Iheanacho previously, and he just looks as if he's just lacking at that vital moment. Works hard, great team player, but he's that little bit of class and quality that turns an average or a good team into like an excellent team. And I'm just not seeing that from Jamie Vardy at this moment. Is he capable of going out there and producing it this weekend? Of course he can. He could win single-handedly. He could win that game for Leicester. But based on what we're seeing and the performances, and if you're wanting a decision, then I would just there's a lot to like on paper, but is it the old Brian Clough? I think it was. We don't play on paper. It's when you go out there on the grass, and I'm just what I'm seeing with my eye doesn't necessarily tally with, what some of the data suggests, and maybe that's why it's been reflected in the results.
I think Iheanacho's fine to hold, but the others, like you said there, it's a bit risky. You're not even sure who's going to be starting, who's going to be playing. And yeah, Leicester, the reason why they're in this situation now is because they have let themselves down. They've let in too many goals. They haven't scored enough. And Vardy isn't looking as good as he once was. So I think you're right in a sense. I'm happy with Iheanacho. I think he kind of pops up, and that leaky Tottenham defence, it has improved of late, but it's still, you just know that they're going to concede one or two sloppy goals in a game and put themselves at risk once again of losing or drawing a game that should have been much easier for themselves. The same can be said of Leicester. So it could be one to keep an eye on. It could well also be a cagey affair, but I think owning Iheanacho is fine in my mind. But for now, that is the last podcast for this season in terms of assets. We do have one more in terms of answering your questions. So do send in any questions that you have for the Reddit thread. And we wish you the best of luck. We wish you the best of luck in winning your mini leagues, just like me and Ben are having here against one another. And after that, do stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed, because the content is not going to end. We'll have a bit of analysis of the season, why certain things have and haven't happened. But then we're going to be building towards the Euros. And after that, we're going to be building towards next season and hopefully a bit more normality. But for now, I'm going to pass over to you, Ben, to sign us out.
Yeah, thanks for those closing comments, Jason. Brilliant. No, really enjoyed these attacking and defensive asset podcast over the course of the season. A lot of hard work and effort being put in on your behalf, and analysis and insights and data. So for that, I thank you from the bottom of your heart. It's very much appreciated, and look forward to our continued work and partnership going forward. Like I say, we've got lots to come as well. It doesn't end because the Premier League season is finished. We will have one eye on the Euros already. And, looking ahead to that, we'll also be covering a lot of stuff in the build-up to the 2021-2022 campaign, which will follow quickly on the heels of those European tournaments. But for now, attacking assets done. We have one more to come, and that is the Reddit community questions. So keep your eyes and ears peeled. And if you have any pertinent questions ahead of the final day, fire them through on the usual channels, and we speak to you all very soon.